Hey, welcome to my weekly monologue. I'm Kanerva. Last week we explored cognitive dissonance, the tension between who I am and who I want to be. Today we move forward because change is not an idea. Change is actually a system. And when you understand the system, transformation becomes predictable. Now I want you to imagine a circle just for a moment. And in the center of that circle are these words: the dynamic of change. Of course, everybody knows that the triangle is a symbol for change, or delta. So that would be in the center of that circle. Now, this is not motivational language. This is structural language. And we're going to describe how identity, behavior, and nervous system regulation actually can evolve and grow. So let's begin in the lower left, roughly at 7 to 8 o'clock. There we're going to find the engine, cognitive dissonance. Now that term was introduced by Festinger in 1957. Cognitive dissonance refers to the psychological discomfort that arises when our behavior and our identity are misaligned. Now what does that mean in practical terms? In practical terms, it may sound or feel or look like this: I am sedentary, but I want to be fit. It may sound or look like I'm reactive, but I want to be regulated. It may sound or look like this: I'm avoiding things, but I want to be decisive. Now that tension is not a sign of weakness, not at all. It's actually data, feedback, good information for you to work from. It signals a misalignment, and misalignment generates negative energy. But energy alone does not produce change. You need to have a process, a syntax, a structure for change. So if we move from that 7 to 8 position in the lower left and we move around the clock, I guess for you guys it would be here, if we move around the clock up to the top left between 10 and 11, here we're going to encounter a principle that's associated with Edward Deming and the philosophy of Kaizen. Simplistically, Kaizen is what gets measured gets done. Now, Deming helped rebuild post-war Japanese industry by introducing systems thinking and measurable improvement. His premise was really simple. If you can't measure it, you cannot improve it. Change requires metrics. Inspiration alone is not enough. Insight's certainly not enough. You need to be able to measure the change to know if you're getting the results you want. So let's say you wanted better health. What are you measuring? Well, if you have optimal or really good health, you might have better sleep and better sleep duration. You might have optimal protein intake. You might have a specific training frequency, and you might measure your resting heart rate and your heart rate variability. If you want better emotional regulation, what might you measure? Well, you might think about how often am I triggered, especially by certain people, and how long does it take to recover after I'm activated, and how much sleep latency do I have, and what kind of conflict avoidance patterns am I using? Now, without measurement, intention decays. Measurement stabilizes attention. So let's keep going around the clock and go to 12 o'clock. Here I've put sensory acuity. Now in NLP, sensory acuity refers to the ability to notice precisely and without distortion what's actually happening. Now most people do not fail because they lack motivation. They fail because they lack good feedback and they don't take action on the feedback they get. If your nervous system is still hyper-aroused, and your sleep data will reveal it. If your physical training is inconsistent, your performance numbers will show it. If your communication style is abrasive, your relational outcomes will expose it. Sensory acuity prevents fantasy from overriding reality. It anchors change in observable evidence. So if we keep going, if we move from 12 o'clock around to, say, 1:30, 2 o'clock. Here we're going to find a statement that's often attributed to Albert Einstein, sometimes to Henry Ford. Who cares? It captures an important neurological truth. Here it goes. The more you do of what you've done, the more you'll get of what you have. Think about that. Whether either of them said is secondary. The principle aligns here with Hebbian learning, introduced by Donald Hebb. And simplistically again, he said that neurons that fire together wire together. Now, he never said it like that, but that's what he meant. Repetition strengthens neural circuitry, and repeated behavior becomes automatic behavior. Automatic behavior becomes identity. So if you repeat identical patterns, you reinforce identical outcomes. And when measurement and sensory acuity reveal stagnation, logic demands that you take action and you start to change. Now, if we keep going from the 1:30, 2 o'clock down to the lower right to 4 or 5 o'clock, here is the operational core of the model. Your focus drives your behavior, which creates your results. This framework is heavily influenced in part by Tad James, and it clarifies something absolutely essential. Focus drives behavior. Behavior creates results. And guess what? I don't think we have to talk about failure. All we have to do is talk about results, because results are feedback about what you're focused on. Now, attention's not neutral. Attention organizes our neurology. Your nervous system amplifies what you repeatedly orient towards, what you focus on. Threat focus produces defensive behavior. If you feel threatened, you will go into defensive posturing. Possibility focus produces exploratory behavior or curiosity or positivity. A precision focus produces a skilled behavior. And if your results are inconsistent, that's feedback that your focus is probably inconsistent. If your results are poor, your focus is not on what you want. This is attentional neuroscience, not motivational rhetoric, not rah-rah. So let's move to 6 o'clock on our clock. And here we have the words behavioral flexibility. In NLP, we have a saying. It goes like this: the person with the most behavioral flexibility will control the system. When results are not aligned with intention, the solution is just not more effort. It's certainly not more intensity. It's flexibility. You must demonstrate behavioral flexibility, the ability to shift and move. Use different language, use different timing, use a different strategy. Move to a new environment. Rigidity produces predictable outcomes. Flexibility, behavioral flexibility, emotional flexibility, intellectual flexibility interrupts repetition and opens new neural pathways. And then we return to where we begin, at 7:30, 8 o'clock, right here. Cognitive dissonance. The gap between who I am and who I want to be. We've come full cycle now. And here it is again. You experience cognitive dissonance. You define measurable indicators that you are moving towards who you want to be. You develop your sensory acuity to interpret the results you're getting, which is feedback. And you recognize that repetition reinforces results. So if you're not getting the results you want, you need to adjust your focus. And by adjusting your focus or changing your focus, you will change your behavior. And your behavior will create new results, which you measure again. And so the cycle continues. This is Kaizen, Edward Deming, applied to emotion, behavior, and identity, not industries in Japan. It is continuous improvement. Small corrections, repeated consistently. Now let's bring this into the domain I work in, trauma and nervous system healing. Many people attempt to change cognitively with their minds, think their way through the problem. They kind of sound like Winnie the Pooh. Think, 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 think. They declare new intentions. They visualize outcomes. They repeat their affirmation. But if the nervous system remains in sympathetic activation, behavior defaults to protection. And trauma is not a mindset failure. It's an actual nervous system response to a perceived threat. The nervous system injuries resolve through correct neurological engagement. Measurement in this domain might include things like sleep metrics. How easily does a person fall asleep? Do they fall asleep in minutes or hours or not at all? It might include heart rate variability, very important indicator of health. It might include emotional reactivity frequency. It might include trigger intensity. How intense do you respond to triggers? Sensory acuity means noticing activation early. And behavioral flexibility may involve shifting from confrontation to curiosity, from rumination to action, and from isolation to connection. And focus must shift from fixing myself to resetting, reprogramming, re-regulating. The dynamic of change is not linear. I'm suggesting to you today it's circular. And each pass through the loop narrows the gap between who you are and who you intend to become. Dissonance decreases. Authenticity, I would argue, increases. And when that happens, your identity updates. And this isn't through force. It's through action, acuity, feedback, and iteration. Remove measurement and the cycle collapses. Remove sensory acuity and you lose direction. Remove flexibility and you stagnate. And if you remove focus, your behavior will fragment. There's no other way. If you suppress cognitive dissonance, growth will stop. Change is not magic, guys. Change is doable. It has a mechanical structure to it. And when you understand that mechanical structure and the neuroscience behind it, progress becomes absolutely predictable. So if you're currently experiencing tension between who you are and who you want to be, do not interpret that as a weakness, a failure, a shortcoming. Interpret it as the beginning of a cycle. That dissonance, that discomfort is a sign to take action. Define what matters and then measure it. Observe honestly, observe patiently, adjust deliberately with intention, and observe what the change does. Repeat that cyclically as you go around the cycle. And know that that is the dynamic of change. We'll see you next week.